Well, Simon has shown you the future. I would like to show you an alternate future. So this talk is about dystopian futures and what possible relevance they might have for emergency medicine today. Now, most of you probably have a vision of the future in your mind. Is yours a bright, shiny Star Trek sort of a future? Or do you imagine something a little more bleak? Like Simon has said, what tools do we have to predict the future? The question I have is, can literature give us a preview of coming attractions? But before I get too serious, I'd like to just start with a little bit of guilt-free enjoyment, just to get it. Is it dystopia? What is dystopia? Well, dystopia is a fictional, futuristic society characterised by human misery. So, not very much in common with emergency departments of today, really. Or are perhaps the seeds there? Manipulation rife. Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale also showcases biological control, this time through the control of reproductive technology by a military theocratic dictatorship. On the other hand, the movie Brazil shows us a tragicomic view, we have a bit of sound there, of dystopia. But although all these stories are different, the themes are the same. The individual is oppressed. Freedom is non-existent or illusory. Poverty is frequent. Society is fearful. There is always disintegration of the finer aspects of society. Morality is abandoned. Culture is questionable. Police states are common, and there's often overwhelming bureaucracy. There's environmental ruin. And in almost all of them, the individual has very little control over their fate. They are fearful, frightening views of the future. And of course, young adult literature now has had this massive resurgence in dystopian literature with things like Hunger Games and The Maze Runner. But I can see the tweets. I can hear you all saying it's a very long bow to draw, Dr. Johnston, with emergency departments of today. You know, how can you possibly put the two together? Well, the key, of course, and this is the important thing, to understanding dystopian literature is in the backstory. George Orwell wrote 1984 in 1949. The war had just ended. McCarthyism was at its peak influence. All the world politics were shadowboxing around each other. Socialism was rising up. George Orwell himself was a dedicated socialist. But he could see in socialism not only the potential for great global good, but also the potential for terrible atrocities to be done in its name. And he was really interested in the individual. What are the small decisions that an individual makes that can lead to these terrible futures? What happens when a person turns a blind eye or ignores what's in front of them? What are their small, tiny fears and niggles that occur in today? Dystopian literature is a fictional projection of those tiny fears and niggles that we have about today. They take those fears and those worries and they let them grow. They turn a mirror onto us and our fears and repackage them as sinister prophecies. So really the question I have is today, what are the things that we do today that might lead us down a dystopian path? Before we do that, let's sidestep for a moment. Let's imagine a utopia. A wonderful, that bright, shiny, optimistic future. What might that look like for us in emergency medicine? Well, we've got a lot of these things here already. We've heard about them. We've got augmented reality, information we need right there in front of us. Even better, right in front of our eyes, so we never have to break that all-important eye contact that's very important, with that perfect connectivity between patient, clinician, and information. Oh, this is Schmidt. which is meat grown from a single stem cell. It's very exciting. It's environmentally friendly, no methane, hardly uses any water. Soon we'll be doing whole organs from a single stem cell. It's incredibly exciting. Who knows where that's going to lead from a pharmacobiogenetic engineering point of view? And look at these beautiful 3D printed, perfectly sculpted replacement cyborg-like parts. It's very exciting. And robots, we've got these here now. These are operating as we speak. They're only going to get better. They're going to get their hands-free, remote, sterile, superior tactile function. They're getting better and better, and even better, you can use them remotely. You don't even have to be in the same room as the surgeon, so you don't have to listen to their jokes. And only a couple of weeks ago, we heard that a nanorobot had been sent down to retrieve a button battery. The future will be nanorobots. There'll be robots operating in viscera without you even having to open them up. Terribly exciting. Oh, genome mapping. Perfectly bespoke, individualised medicine based on your own genetics and epigenetics. For a few shekels now, you can have your entire genome mapped. There are places in America that tell you that they can delete cancer genes like pressing a delete button on a computer. A group called CRISPR are now about to start producing DNA technology just with the raw materials. They don't even need a human. The possibilities are intoxicating. But what if the things we do today, the decisions you and I make today, don't lead us down that path, but lead us down a very different path? Let's have a look at some of the things that we do today that might have a kind of a scarier effect. Poor antibiotic stewardship. For decades, we have flagrantly, brazenly overprescribed broad-spectrum antibiotics. Combine that with heinous overuse in agriculture and unprecedented international travel, and you have spiralling microbial resistance. We've been told the last antibiotic, colistin, is about to fall. CRE, VRE, E. coli, enterococci, malaria, TB, gonorrhea, Staph aureus, all of these things have got very few agents in some pockets left that will treat them. There's not many new agents coming on board. It's not been economically viable for pharmaceutical companies to develop new antibiotics. There's a few hardy souls out there scouring the Amazon or working with new technologies such as nanotechnology and light, but there's very few agents coming on board. The WHO has said that this is not the future, this is now. Unless we take radical, global, immediate action, we are facing a post-antibiotic future. And I give to you a picture of the plague. Choosing unwisely. We massively over-order tests. All tests have an economic test at the time and an economic burden downstream. It's difficult to know how much money is spent on unnecessary testing. The Choosing Wisely campaign in 2015 in Australia estimated that up to $15 billion was spent on unnecessary tests and treatments. That's to say nothing of our massive use of radiation with our use of CT scans. We don't even know what sort of oncologic burden we are donating to the future. It's not much of a stretch of imagination to imagine in another global financial collapse, a little blip, and we can't even afford to treat the diseases that we are causing now. And talking about health budgets, they're hot topics. In many places, the budgets are contracting. Economics is very unstable, and we in emergency departments sometimes feel that we're a little bit immune from their effects, but we spend a lot of money on the thin leading edge. You all know that we spend a significant proportion of money on the last year of a patient's life, and we do spend a lot of money to get very small gains. On an individual level, of course, it's always justifiable, and As a department, often we have, and in tertiary hospitals, we have very loud voices agitating for our share of the money without often thinking what on earth it is we're trying to achieve, and forgetting that there is very significant global health dollar inequity and that there are people living in dystopia right now. Climate change is upon us. Hospitals are becoming more and more disposable. You can throw everything out. We produce about 5 kilos of waste per person per day. One state of Australia, the hospitals produced as much waste in 1 year as 200,000 households. Now, once again, on face value, you think, well, you can't recycle hospital stuff, microbiological contamination, all that stuff, but there's very little evidence that that is the case. And in fact, most of the decisions about infection control are made by committees behind closed doors, a long way away from patient care areas. And often they're decisions that are made, as I said, not on evidence, but for other things, such as the economy of immediacy, where it's cheaper to buy crappy throwaway items rather than invest in good quality stuff and processes, such as sterilisation, and also user preference. People like stuff you can chuck in the bin. So what we end up doing is clogging landfill and spewing carbon into the air as we incinerate the waste. And then my own personal demon, my own nemesis, paperwork, bureaucracy, the administrative apocalypse. You've all seen this graph. It seems as though the response to a dwindling health budget is to hire more administrators. I've got a recurring nightmare that I'm going to die like Harry Tuttle from Brazil, consumed, swallowed by paperwork. Now, of course, bureaucracy was actually brought in for a very sound reason. It was brought in to bring in fairness, logic, rules, the removal of nepotism, the removal of favouritism. But what it does, it just removes innovation, creativity, humanity, individuality, compassion, empathy. Yes. Do we really want, our futures run by people who really like meeting and like changing their acronyms every 3 months? I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'm being a bit overly pessimistic here. I know there are a lot of good places out there, a lot of good departments, a lot of good hospitals that are doing great things with recycling, antibiotic stewardship, choosing wisely, good economic decision-making, but not all. And it's just a chance for you perhaps to reflect on what your department does and your role in that department. Because like always, I don't have any answers. I only have questions. Because the thing is that I'm not just an emergency physician. I'm a writer. And it is a writer's job to ask, what if? But I do believe that there are lessons for us in literature if we listen carefully enough. The Prussian existentialist philosopher Immanuel Kant said that even small decisions ought to be made as if we were choosing for all of humanity, not just our paltry selves. So really, that's all I wanted to say, is that if you find yourself making decisions or things go on in front of you that give you significant disquiet, then you should be listening to those things. So I guess the other thing is, who do we want to give us our future? Who do we want to design our future? Do we want it in the hands of passionate insightful individuals or in the hands of government and committees and corporations? Because in the end, you guys are in charge of the future. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Michelle, I think everyone on Twitter was sort of definitely sort of empathizing and loving the dystopian literature theme, and brought up the question, we seem to love that so much, but not the utopian side. Why is that? Why do we love dystopia and not utopia? I think we all, one of the most fundamental things about literature and life is the human struggle, and we love to see individuals struggle against something bigger and win. Utopia gets kind of a bit boring and bland, and it's just not real. But I think most of us as humans can relate far more to someone who's struggling, because, you know, we all pretty much struggle, and it's kind of nice to see other people who do it too and read about it and watch movies about it as well. Thank you.